talking about. Erev Tov and Shavua Tov, and welcome again to this week's Dvar Malchus class, together with the story of the week preceding the class. This week's class, we'll hear an incredible story. We heard many stories of the Ba'al ShemTov, but this is I would say, an exceptional story, and it also has a very important lesson to learn from the story for each and every one of us. And the story begins in the times of the the Baal Shem Tov was known to be one of the greatest tzaddikim, one of the greatest righteous scholars of his time, that dealt with the mitzvah of pidyon shvu'im, of redeeming those that are in captivity. And when we're talking about captivity, I mean, unlike, or maybe it could be parallel to what we see now here in Israel, that we have Rahman al almost 100. It went down the numbers slightly, but that are in the hands of the Hamas Yimach Shemam. Their name should be obliterated from the world. Well, in those days, the situation was a little different, but basically the same idea. The Jews lived all over Eastern Europe, but they were basically not allowed to be able. Most of the lands were under the jurisdiction of land barons, and these people owned the land, and they owned whoever or whatever was on their land. So if a person wanted to live on their land, they had to pay rent. And in those days, the land barons had a passion for money, and they had a disliking, to say the least, to the Jewish nation. This combination together brought about the fact that they extorted very high amounts of money from Jews that lived on their land, to the extent that many times, as hard as the Jews worked in order to go into to deliver the payments, they were not able to live up to what they needed to pay, or what the land baron demanded. And at that point, sometimes there were credits that were given so that they would be able to make up the money. But usually the land barons were very cruel, and they took the Jews and they placed them into captivity. And in those days, it was like in the times of Yosef HaTzadik, that was placed in a bore. He was placed in a pit, and they had very deep pits or caves, dungeons, and this is where they kept the Jews until anyone that was able to, or anyone that fancied the mitzvah of pidyon shvuim, redeeming the captives, came and paid money. And sometimes Rahman al money was not paid, and the Jews lost their lives. In this case, the Baal Shem Tov came Erev Shabbos, and he heard that there was a family, not only the master, the father of the home, but the mother and the children. They were all taken away because they didn't live up to their payments, and they were put in the dungeon. And the Baal Shem Tov made unbelievable efforts in order to go into to generate the funds that the land baron demanded, until he finally, Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, he was able to go and to get all the money and hand it over to the land baron. With this, the land baron was upset. I mean, he received the money that he demanded, but he didn't receive his, how would we say, his pleasure of seeing the Jews suffer in his dungeon. But nevertheless, he allowed the Jews to go out. I mean, under the circumstances that he was paid all this absorbent amount of money. And then they're walking out together with the Baal Shem Tov, thanking him. And then the Baal Shem Tov says, listen, it's right before Shabbos. You're not going to be able to have enough time to get back to the village that you live in. And you definitely didn't have any time to go and to prepare for Shabbos, so you won't have any food. So they looked at the Baal Shem Tov, and they said, yes, you're right. What should we do? The Baal Shem Tov looked at them and he said, you'll be my guests for this Shabbos in my home. And this was one of the most greatest honors to be a guest in the home of the Ba'al ShemTov. But the family, not knowing what they had, what they were able to do, they went with the Ba'al ShemTov to his home. They were received with great honor, and they were given accommodations. And after davening, they sat down for the Shabbos meal Friday night. At the Shabbos meal, as everyone is eating, the Baal Shem Tov turns to the father of the family and he says, "No, so can you tell us some news?" And the person turns to the Baal Shem Tov, and he's totally baffled. Because he's been in this dungeon for quite a few months now. How was he able to go and to have any notion of news that's going on in the outside world? This he tells the Baal Shem Tov, and the Baal Shem Tov says, "Well, if you don't have any news, so maybe you could tell us something from the past." Something from the past? Yeah, saying some experiences that you had, or anything interesting that you encountered in the in the pit, in the dungeon. And he's thinking and thinking, and he's such a humble person. He says, I don't know. There's nothing that I really could tell about. It was dark and it was cold, and we barely had anything, that was given to us to eat." And then he thinks again, and then he says, but yes, there is something that was extraordinary, that was literally something that maybe would interest everyone over here. And he starts telling about the fact that during the weeks and months that they were in the pit, in the dungeon, so at the other side of the dungeon where they were, they heard the entire week crying and moaning. It sounded really, really serious, like someone was in terrible pain. But then when it came Friday afternoon, all of a sudden they heard this laughing, and it was not just a real, regular laughing, it was a wild laughing, unbelievable wild laughing. And this is the way they experienced all their weeks. The moaning and groaning and crying and screaming sometimes during the weekdays. And then Friday, all of a sudden the grand wild laughter. Until the very last week before they were taken out of the dungeon, and he was notified that he's going to be leaving. So that particular week, the whole week, the screaming and the pain and the shouts, the crying, it was 10 times velocified than any of the other weeks that they experienced in the dungeon. And on Friday afternoon, it was the laughing, the wild laughter was again 10 times the amount that it was every other Friday afternoon. And when they heard this laughter, he finally gathered the courage to shout out to the other side of the dungeon, which was totally pitch black. And he always warned his wife and his children never to go over to that area, because who knows what might be lurking over there. But then he shouts out, and he says, "Who goes there? Who are you?" To the other side of the dungeon. And then he hears a voice answer him. The voice tells him, "We are unholy spirits, defiled spirits." What is it? What is the unholy spirits? What? And why are you crying out in pain and laughing every Friday afternoon? And so the spirits start explaining to him, and they say, "You should know one thing, that there's a Jewish individual, a very learned and holy Jew, and all week long he fasts, doesn't eat. All week long he fasts, and the only time that he allows himself to go and to eat is Shabbos and Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, after he fasts the entire week, he prepares himself a cup of milk." And this cup of milk he prepares specially, goes and he milks it from the cow, and he boils it, and he waits until it simmers in order for him to go and to drink it. Now, every week we go and we arrange one way or another that someone goes by and boom, knocks the cup of milk down. When the milk is spilled, so this brings about a very angry response from the Torah scholar, and he gets very upset, and this anger causes him to lose all the reward that he earned throughout the week while he was fasting. And not only does he lose it, but it becomes our nourishment. In other words, all the kedusha, all the holiness is transferred to the unholy spirits. And this is why he hears the laughter every Friday afternoon. And what was so special this last week? This last week, so the Torah scholar, he became wise to what's going on, and he sees that every week his milk is spilled. So this week he went and he prepared something special. He went and he took the milk that he prepared, and he locked it up in a vault. He locked it up in a vault with on lock and key. And when everything was locked up, we said to ourselves, "Oi, what are we going to do? The milk is locked up, and we won't be able to spill it." And that's why the entire week, the screaming and the shouting and the crying was 10 times the extent that you've heard in the past weeks and months. Okay, and what about the laughter? Ah, now comes the good part. The whole unholy spirits tell him. You see, Friday afternoon came, and we were thinking and thinking, how are we going to go and foil his milk drinking? How are we going to spill the milk? And we finally came to the conclusion. We brought about a we brought about a salesman that sells wood, and he knocks on the door, and he says to the wife of the family comes and opens the door, and he says, "Listen, I'm a very very successful wood chopper, and I have an entire wagon full of wood, and I'm selling it at a third of the price. You can never get such a price anywhere. And if you're interested, I'll sell it to you here and now." And the woman heard the price, and she said, "Wow, this is enough wood to last us the entire winter, and a third of the price that it would cost us." She immediately goes to her husband, and she says that she would like to have money in order to go and to pay for the wood. And the husband was deep into his study. He says to her, "Sure, no problem." And she says, "Please, would you give me the keys to the vault, because that's where the money is in the wallet." And he, without thinking, gives her the keys. She goes over to the vault, opens the door, and as she's reaching in order to go and to get the money, the unholy spirits move her hand, and the entire milk, all the jug of milk, falls and spills all over the floor. The husband wakes up from his study, and he looks and he sees his precious milk is spilled on the floor, and he blows up with anger. He is so upset, and we can understand him to a certain extent, at least. I mean, we're not on the holy realms of someone that is on this level, but despite everything that he tried in order to go and to make sure that he won't get angry, he got angry. And with this anger, all of his holiness, all of his studies, all of the efforts that he made in order to not get angry was transferred to us. And that's why you heard the crazy and wild laughter 10 times the amount that you heard all the other weeks in the past. And with this, when he finished the story, all of a sudden, the Ba'al ShemTov looked around at it. The family was sitting on one side, and all his disciples, all his students were sitting around the table on the other side. All of a sudden, one of the students, one of the disciples of the Ba'al ShemTovs, he slips off his chair and falls onto the ground and faints. And it was known that this particular student of the Ba'al ShemTov was a student that fasted the entire week, every week. And apparently he was the one that was spilling that whose milk was being spilled, and he was the one that was getting angry every week. And he fainted because he couldn't take it. He didn't even understand uh, how much he was actually sacrificing and how much he was a victim of the unholy spirits. But with this, we have the lesson that we wanted to understand, and we want to make clear when we're talking about going and being able to control our temper, being able to control and not access anger, not and not get upset. It's a very big challenge. It's not something small. We see even the great Torah scholars, the great disciples of the Ba'al ShemTov, Torah scholars that would be able to fast the entire week. They weren't able to go and to stand up to these challenges. But nevertheless, the fact of the matter is that when we are aware of what's going on and we have the acknowledgement that this is so important, that it goes and it serves as, first of all, nourishment to the unholy spirits, and second of all, this is the basis of all that which we work for and all the efforts that we've been making, the reward that we're meant to be receiving. And this is something that brings the geula, the redemption, and it heralds in the redemption on an even speedier level. So then many people, when when we have this awareness, would be able to go and to at least try to overcome this concept of anger and being upset. And with this, Bezrat Hashem, will have the merit of receiving the revelation of the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach on a good and revealed basis. And since we already were speaking about the miracle story of the Ba'al ShemTov in regard to the great mitzvah of Pidyon Shvuim, to go and to redeem hostages, Hashem himself should do the mitzvah that we have been doing all these ages, all these generations. Hashem should do the mitzvah himself and redeem all the hostages from captivity in a healthy and happy and joyous manner, and it should be together with the revelation of the Rebbe Shlita Melech Ha'Moshiach, Teichef umyad, mamish, mamish, mamish. Amen. Yechi Adonenu, Moreinu, V'Rabbeinu, HaMelech HaMoshiach, Chai V'Kayim Le'olam.